You shared with me earlier that this has been quite a year for you. Tell me what it meant to you to receive this Genesis Prize.
Thank you. Is this working? There we are. Good morning, and thank the Jerusalem Post for this opportunity to be here. Well, this has been an extraordinary year once I received this prize, which in itself was interesting because when they first came to me to talk about this prize and the $1 million and how we would present it, and I stopped them and I said, I think there's been a terrible mistake. And they said, what do you mean? There's a big mistake here. My mother is not Jewish. And they looked at me, and without saying it, you can see, schmuck, you don't think we don't know that? You know, So that is sort of where I started. I started from. But this came about really, and I have my son Dylan to thank, because we'll get into it later on in terms of my history and how isolated or separate I felt from the Jewish faith through my upbringing, because only one of my parents was Jewish. But my 11-year-old son at the time, Dylan, was in school, and as you know, as kids do, they go and spend the weekends at other friend's house, and he had a couple of Jewish friends, and he'd go after school on Friday, and they would celebrate Shabbat, and he would light the candles, and then on Saturday morning they were preparing for their bar mitzvahs, and as a result, he would hang out at the house, but ultimately he'd go to the temple and sort of sit in the back and listen to them. And about 9 months went by, and he came to us and to his mother, and I said, Mom, Dad, I want to get bar mitzvah. And we thought, yeah, sure, he knows about the prize, the presents, and, the nice things and all of that. But he said, no, when they light the candles on Friday, my soul feels alive, and I feel something. And when I go with them, with the group, and I feel a togetherness in the group. And so we were deeply touched, and we went to our local temple, Shrei Tefillah, in Bedford, talked to Rabbi Greenberg, and he talked a lot with Dylan. And Dylan began a very hard working process to make up for some years of homework, and made a beautiful bar mitzvah. And as a result, we went to Israel after that. I'd been many times in the past, and somebody took a photograph and thought that we'd had our bar mitzvah in Israel, and that's how the Genesis Prize, I think, first contacted us. And for me, it was a complete catharsis. I really actually, I'm embarrassed, I almost broke down, because I realized that for my entire life, I believed that I was not Jewish. I've been to Israel as early as 1964. My father made the movie Cast a Giant Shadow about Mickey Marcus. Thank you. It was an extraordinary history lesson. It was still with 1964 with the old road to Jerusalem and passing all the burnt out tanks and armored cars, going to the border, seeing the definitive difference between the agriculture on one side and the desert on the other, and just an extraordinary sense of race and religion. But then throughout my life, I was consistently told by Jews, but you're not Jewish. Your mother is not Jewish. And I remember my cousin's 13th, his bar mitzvah when I was about 12, 13 years old. But I had, even there, they were saying, yeah, but your mother's not Jewish. And I had my appendix taken out. I had appendicitis. I don't know if it was the gefilte fish or what. But right there, out. And all through school. So for me, this was a confirmation. I'm a secular Jew. I'm not formally religious, but I wanted to be a part of this tribe. I love the values. I really do. And so this, for me, this year has been about rediscovering the Jewish values that I cherish. It has brought our family closer together. And clearly, clearly we hit some kind of nerve. Because as we reached out with this prize by getting together with the Jewish Funders Network, and as Andreas mentioned, we had close to 100 organizations, 17 different countries, just in the area of inclusion and the interfaith issue. There was a lot of people out there. So in the spirit of Abraham's tent and lifting the flaps, I'm very comfortable and hopeful for the area of inclusion. And I think it's an area that is going to definitely bring Jews from the States and outside of Israel closer together with Jews in Israel.
What have you learned about how to promote inclusion from your experience?
Well, I think just by acknowledging that there's an issue, I think just by the simple questions of why in this day, or when I was growing up, I mean certainly the Reform movement, which I think started in 1982 or 83. But before that, even questioning, well, with the DNA tests and everything today, you can easily tell who your father is. You certainly understand how this was an issue over centuries, but now you clearly can. And I think just by raising some of these issues that have been long dormant and trying to clarify the confusion. I mean, Birthright Israel. When I was growing up, I would say, well, let me see. The Nazis would have no trouble taking me. Why won't Israel? There was issues that came up on this. When you see that I believe in terms of birthrights, if your one grandparent is, you can return to Israel, but then trying to understand, well, but you can't get married, or what happens if you die? So there's some confusion things that have been raised that I don't know if there's a clear answer, but all of a sudden, as far as interfaith families who up until pretty much now have shied away because they did not feel welcome. It wasn't a question necessarily of assimilating and losing their Jewish faith, but they did know that there is a substantial part of that tribe that did not welcome them.
Now, I know that your daughter also has connected with Judaism and celebrated her bat mitzvah recently. Mazel tov.
She did, thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you also about your father, Kirk Douglas, who's 99 years old. A strong supporter of Israel. As you said, he starred in that famous film as Mickey Marcus in Cast the Giant Shadow, which was also your first role. He grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and he had a late bar mitzvah too. How did that affect you?
Well, he did. He was from Belarus. His family migrated from Belarus, and he was born here in the States in 1916. Right after the revolution. Came from a close Orthodox family, and like many, by the time he went away to college, he began to assimilate and was not as closely tied to his faith. And interestingly enough, when he was 70. He had a nasty helicopter crash. He was with a friend who was piloting a helicopter, and they hit a aerobatics airplane leaving an airport. The aerobatics plane with its student pilot crashed. It got caught up in flames, and both of them were killed instantly. And my father and his friend who were piloting the helicopter fell 40 feet down onto the runway. The rotor was still going, gasoline pouring out. And didn't catch fire, and he survived. And while being in the hospital at 70, he began asking himself, why am I alive? Why is this 18-year-old student pilot dead? And he began working on the Old Testament, with the Rabbi David Olpe in West Side in New York, in Los Angeles, and really worked diligently. And we all saw a market change. Now, granted, like many of us, as your career wanders, you now have more time maybe to invest in your spirituality, and I think that certainly happened with Dad. But it did wonders for him, for his demeanor, for his behavior, for his relationship with his kids, and I watched it. And when he turned 83, he had a bar mitzvah. And it was a very moving experience, and I think that was my first really understanding of Tikkun Olam. And he had spent his life working in preparing the world, working in a lot of Jewish agencies, and I think it's left a lasting effect both on me and certainly on his grandchildren. And I get such nachis knowing that my children, when Dylan wore the same prayer shawl that Kirk had, I know what it meant to my father.
Well, that's very meaningful. Do you mind if I throw you one from left field, as they say?
I'll tell you after you ask me that.
We're experiencing a lot of political drama in Israel at the moment, but I was wondering how you see the U.S. presidential race.
I got to come all the way, the Jerusalem Post, right, to get a question like that. Well, it certainly turned out to be a little different than anybody anticipated, to say the least. We'll see. I'm historically a Democrat. I support the Clintons. I have for a long time. Saying that, I know Donald Trump. Play golf with him. Good friends. Like a lot of situations, you don't talk politics or religion, you can get along with anyone. So, we'll see, but I know that, Israel is our closest ally. Everybody knows that, And so we have the right to disagree like any family does, but I don't think there's anything that's going to destroy the underlying closeness of our relationship.
Do you think Hollywood has a role to play in the fight against BDS and the delegitimization of Israel?
Not unless it's a good movie. I mean, you can't put the message, before the picture. I do say part of my experience with the Genesis Prize this year was to do a speaking tour with Natan Sharansky. And we went, thank you, and we spoke at Brown University, Stanford University, and my alma mater, University of California at Santa Barbara, encouraging, and Natan, as you know, always looking for a good scrap, was looking and reaching out for these BDS protesters to better understand it. But this is a time to speak up. This is really, really a time to speak up. And this is not a time to let anything go unsaid. And if I'm having the short time I have left, I really want to thank the Jewish Agency and Natan for all that he has been doing on all sides of the equation. He's an extraordinary man. And it was really great. To the State of Israel and to Prime Minister Netanyahu in supporting this Genesis Prize. I know there is some controversy involved with it, and I admire him for reaching out. And to the Genesis Group, Genesis Prize, to Stan Povled, Jill Smith, thank you so much for all of their efforts and support this year.
Let me ask you one final question then. On this 3-campus tour that you did with Natan Sharansky, what would you say is the main lesson you learned, and what would your message be to this audience?
Well, the main lesson I think I learned is that one, be it U.S. Political elections and super PACs, or be it the BDS movement, we really have to do our homework as to who are financing these campaigns. I think that is the biggest issue. As far as the BDS movement, it's a little more diverse, but I think it's important to clearly understand where the funding comes for a organization that's as well organized as they are. And as far as our U.S. elections, these super PACs are not helpful to anything.
I can continue talking to you all day. No one seems to be cutting us off. So how about if I ask you one more question? What was your favorite film that you were in and your favorite film that you produced?
Whoa. Well, I mean, first of all, any movie you make, you work as hard on your failures as you do your successes. You know, no one knows going in which way it's going to be. Producing is an easy one. That would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which, thank you, which was the first picture I ever produced, and we won the top 5 Academy Awards, and that was a wonderful project. On the ones that I've acted in, I tend to enjoy the kind of what I call the gray area films, you know, which is what the world seems to be. It's hard to tell the villains or the heroes. I liked pictures like Falling Down, Fatal Attraction, a picture called Wonder Boys, The War of the Roses. Those are in that kind of area, my favorite.
How do you choose your role, and what are you working on now?
I choose the movie because I've got a producing background. I'm more interested in being involved in a good movie, and if I get a good part, so much the better. I mean, recently I just had a cancer bout, and afterwards I was fortunate enough to have this picture Liberace Behind the Candelabra, which was a great part. Thank you, which is a really, really lovely part. But I'm always looking for what I think is the best script, the best story. I like to be in good movies, you know, not bad movies. So I think that makes a difference. Right now, we're doing another Ant-Man film. I'm going to be working on that, and I'm producing a lot. Working on one of my father's movies called 7 Days in May for HBO. We're turning that into a mini-series, Conquest of Mexico. So I've been very active.
Well, we wish you all the best. Batzlacha, Mazal Tov, and thank you so much for honoring us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.